Hello and welcome to Catamount Community Connection, our weekly public affairs show here on all 5 of the Catamount radio stations. I'm Brian Collamore, your host, and each week we speak with community leaders from the business, professional, nonprofit, and political arenas. And our show is brought to you by the Rutland County Agricultural Society, which has brought you the Vermont State Fair at Rutland since 1846, before the Civil War. We're looking forward to the 180th Vermont State Fair coming up in August of this coming year, and it will coincide with the 250th birthday of the United States of America. We're going to check in with the mayor of the city of Rutland, Mike Doenges, and I think it's been about a month or so since we had him on. I know we did begin talking about the city budget, the proposed budget, which will be voted on by city residents, town meeting day. But I haven't had a chance to get caught up. Maybe I think the easiest way, Mike, is to talk about the process again. I know each sort of line item goes to a different committee.
That's right. They
cannot add to it, but they can take it away. And then eventually it goes before the full board and it gets voted on, I think by, let's see, next month, because we're still in November, even though Thanksgiving. And by the way, I hope everybody had a happy Thanksgiving.
Yep.
And then it'll go before the voters in March. So where are we with that? Have you heard any rumblings?
Yeah, so I had my department heads, and I think we talked in October, right before I submitted. So I had all my department heads submit their budgets to me. And what I asked for when I first became mayor was give me the wish list and then give me reality, right? Because Rutland, we tend to run on a shoestring budget. Well, as a first experience, I'll tell you, the wish list was quite large.
Yeah, I can imagine.
We operate with about, we're right now just under $26 million budget. The wish list in year one came in over 30. So there's things that these departments want to do to help their community that we just can't afford to do right now. So this year, I said, all right, give me bare bones. What can you do? We have a lot of salary increases because of contracts that have already been agreed to, signed off on, and completed, right? So we have those. I said we have, almost 12% in healthcare increases. Our year split. So the healthcare year is January to January. The fiscal year for the city is July to July. So, we have 2 years that we have to straddle on the healthcare bill. So we're looking at something to the tune of almost a 12% increase, which is huge. So I said, give me your bare bones. And they delivered. Most of the departments delivered really, really well. There were a few special asks. We'll go over those. But, everybody came in outside what we call below the line. So if you look at our budget and you go through our process, everything from salaries down to workers' comp. So if you come below workers' comp, that's like hey, I need new tires for the truck, or we need more money to fix this in the building, that type of stuff.
Okay.
Everything below the line in almost everybody's budgets, with the exception of DPW, and like I said, we'll talk about that, has been really, really tight. I mean, just bare minimum increases. So what we're seeing in the majority of that 11.9% that we submitted to the board for review is mostly above the line. It's mostly salaries, workers' comp, health insurance, things like that. Now, certain departments, that includes some new positions, but we got the TIF, and the TIF is going to pay for those. So we can talk about that in a minute. Any questions so far?
No, I'm right there.
All right.
The governor had requested, not that I want to compare anything, but he had said to all his department heads, maximum 3% increase.
Yes.
And so far as I understand, 2 of them came back with a little higher, and he said, not good enough, go back and cut. So there will be programs cut, I think, at the state level.
Yeah, and I'm sure we'll see cuts at the city level too. And that's the tough decisions that need to be made.
Right.
Here we are. My mission since I got here has been to try to grow the population of the city to share in the tax burden, right?
Yep.
And we have seen what we call the grand list. So the number that we use to divvy up the tax bill, we've seen that grow. That's a really good thing. We've seen growth. We've seen new permits put in place. We see new people moving to the community and paying those bills. But it's a long haul. These things don't change overnight. So we also have to be cognizant of, hey, we need to provide the services that the community is asking for. We need to do it in the most affordable way possible. And we need to be cognizant of making sure that things aren't deteriorating, right? That we at least keep things up and running. So that's the approach we're taking this year. And most of it, like I said, is in salary. So if we're seeing the increases in salaries, the concern is, and the discussions are we going to have to cut people? Well, if we have to cut people, like if we have to cut positions, then what's going to fall by the wayside? Because the human capital, the people that are working for the city, Brian, they're the ones making sure the roads don't fall apart. They're the ones making sure you're safe in your home, or your house doesn't burn down, or that your building is properly being built. There's no wasted resources in the city. And I challenge people when they ask me all the time. I say, come in, sit down. I will go through the whole budget with you. If you can help me find wasted resources, that's great, because that's what we need to find. So I think the board's going to have their hands full. I'll make some recommendations through the process, but now it's in their hands to make those decisions.
And when do they have to sign off on it?
So what will happen is over the next 3 weeks, the board will have committee meetings, and they have to be done. Usually it's by the end of December. So we're going to do it December 18th as the final vote on the budget that will then go on the ballot for March.
Okay.
Now, Rutland citizens tend to be pretty happy with the amounts that we've asked them for, right? So last year we asked for a 2.9% increase. The year before that was a 7%, and everybody, overwhelming passing on both. But I think my hope is that they're well informed when they're looking at that number, right? That they're seeing what's behind it. So what I've been asking people to do is pay attention to these committee meetings. Come, sit in the committee, listen, ask questions. That's the whole point of why we go through this process. Not every community has this opportunity. We're unique in Rutland. Burlington doesn't do it this way, right? Burlington's given a number. This is what you're going to collect for taxes this year, essentially, based on what the budget was, the raised tax rate was approved. And then they build the budget inside. Rutland citizens get a say in how their city operates, which is very unique. And so we're encouraging people to do that. But the board will start to have committee meetings next week.
And how many committees are there? I should know, but I don't.
I think there's 5, 6, 7, 8 committees, but not all of them see budgets.
Okay.
So we have public safety, so they see the police and fire budget. Yep. So they'll review that. We have finance, that'll review the treasurer's budget and a couple of other ancillary items. Recreation will review the rec budget. Now, historically, the library has been in the recreation budget. But it doesn't necessarily make sense, so we separated that out and moved that to the general. And then so the general committee has the heavy lift. So most of the time we don't send a lot of things to the general committee during the year, but the general committee has the heavy lift on going through the budget this year. So that's my office, that's building and zoning, that's the legal and HR and all those other departments. And then the last one is probably Department of Public Works, and that's where some of the big lift is this year too.
So if a citizen that's listening is in the city, and wants to attend a particular committee meeting, how would they go about finding out when and where they should show up to get involved?
We post all of the meetings in City Hall physically and at most of our locations. But the easiest way is to go to our city website, and in the lower right-hand corner is the city calendar. And all of the meetings and the agendas are posted on that calendar. So pretty much, I believe every budget meeting is already scheduled. So you could go today and look at that and see, which meetings are being held. Like I said, there's a lot of different budgets that fall under general. So when you see that general committee meeting coming in the next week, that's the one that's going to have a heavy lift. But the rest of them are pretty much 1 or 2 budgets in them.
Okay. So we're airing this on the final day of November 30th. I know that there was a little bit of a delay in the beginning of the remediation efforts at downtown for the pit.
Yes.
Belden Corp, which is going to do all that, for some reason, I think they either had staffing issues, or I don't know what the answer or what the reality of the issue was, but they didn't get started as quickly as they wanted to. I did have a question that was asked of me to ask you.
Great.
When we start talking about that. It's from our good friend Paul Welton, by the way, the Master Chief, and we see him a lot at the VFW. Sidewalks on both Center and Wales Streets, I'm assuming, because the road's going to be dug up and all that infrastructure, all that water and electricity and everything else will be redone. I'm assuming that there'll be brand new sidewalks on both of those streets.
Yeah, new sidewalks and new pavement for the streets themselves. Yeah, there's a lot of work that needs to go into that. We're working on that part now. So the timeline, any big project like this, the timeline's going to shift a little bit. So the timeline's shifted. Like you said, the Beldens have got the fences up and they're starting to dig and clean up some of the pit now. They're starting to do some of the work. I think the first thing they're going to do is tear down a portion of that, the Herald building.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
But for our work, we have plumbing work and conduit work to do on Whale Street and Center Street. So we're going to start the bid process here probably sometime in December, January to put out the work for the underground components. So water, wastewater, stormwater, conduit. That will all go out in December, January.
Okay.
For spring work.
And it's going to be on both sides of the streets?
Yeah. I mean, interestingly enough, streetscape we've got calculated in as well. We may not replace the sidewalk, say, on the far side of Whale Street, but we may on the near side. You know what I mean? It really depends on what we have to dig up, what needs to be repaired. But that streetscape is what we're actually going to put out to bid a little later in the season. So while things are torn up, we'll do temporary fixes so that people can get around. We know that, that there are people in wheelchairs or people that are using crutches or whatever it happens to be.
Sure.
Right? You and I could walk down the street without too much of an issue, but we have to accommodate everybody. So we'll be cognizant of that. And I actually had this conversation just this past week with my DPW department and the RRA about, how do we make sure that when we're done with the underground work, if the streetscape work isn't ready to get started yet, because it may not be, we're driving on pavement and walking on sidewalks, because that's really important that there's not this mess in downtown for a year and a half, especially when we finish one work in the fall and we need to get started on the next set of work in the spring. So we got a plan for it, and the goal will be to keep as much access as possible to every business as possible for as long as possible, and try not to impede the process.
The question was asked, I think, because the Veterans of Foreign Wars Post, VFW, is going to repaint their whole building.
Yeah.
And it's a costly project. The contractor that's going to do it has generously donated a lot of the labor and I think material, but it's still going to run, thousands of dollars to do that. So they were, I think, hoping that by the time they get to it, to paint it, that there wouldn't be a lot of dust and commotion. And I mean, I don't know what the timing's going to be.
Likely they're going to beat us to the punch on a lot of it. And what we can coordinate. That's the thing. So that's a great concern. And I spoke with the executive director of the RRA. His name is Sean. You should have him in if you haven't yet.
I have not, but I intend to.
He's got a good plan for the PR, marketing, and communication piece of this. And something like that, I would say, look, if you're doing something with your business and you're on Center Street in Wales, or if you've got some changes you want to make while we're working on stuff, just communicate with us so we can coordinate with you, right? And maybe something as simple as you might want to put up scaffolding and tarp it, right? Like they do that in the big cities when there's big construction projects. But it may be the timing works out that they'll paint, we'll do the dust, and then they can just power wash the building and call it a day. So we're happy to have that discussion. I think that's the answer to that.
Okay, perfect. So we're talking to Rutland City Mayor Mike Doenges, and we've talked a little bit about the budget, which again, city residents will be able to vote on town meeting in March. But if you are interested in a particular part of the budget, you're certainly invited to go online at the City of Rutland website and look up a committee that would be charged with one of the line items, maybe two, maybe three, maybe more, and you can go and participate in asking questions and getting more information about why this particular item has gone up and all that kind of stuff. So hopefully people will be better informed, best informed by the time they're casting a ballot either for or against the municipal side of the budget. The property tax one, we don't know about that one yet. There's a letter which is, I think, due out, if it's not tomorrow, and tomorrow, by the way, is December 1st, so a brand new month. Certainly in the early part of December is when the administration normally sends out a letter which allows people some idea. It's not a definite number, but at least it'll give people an idea of what the property tax rate for their individual municipality would be. I hear, again, you hear things all the time, that it's going to be double digit. We're talking 10, 11, 12% increase again. And this is all centered around that whole task force that was charged with coming up with maps and the kind of reformation of our educational system. That did not happen. The task force did not come up with any maps. They came up with a suggestion. Instead, some people find that suggestion not very workable. Others are in great support of it. But regardless, what is going to happen next year and probably the year after, because whatever changes we're going to have to our educational system is probably not going to be until 2028, the fiscal year then. So for the next 2 years, you will be voting on school budgets, and you will be voting on school board members who are either up for election, re-election, or whatever. So those two things will stay in place in March, and it's not necessarily going to be a situation where there's much that the legislature can do. In the last 2 cycles, we did manage to find one-time money to buy that property tax rate down, so that last year it was somewhere in the 1% to 2% range for most municipalities. Others were higher and some were lower, quite frankly, depending on where you live. But anyway, that's sort of a bad news type thing. And then coupled with perhaps a municipal increase, it's going to be a very tough year. And the budget this year is going to be even tougher for the state, because I don't know where else we're going to look. You know, every cupboard that we've opened, there's nothing left. And I don't know where we're going to find money to buy it down again, but I know that there are people that feel that that would be one way to do it. But the question I have is, okay, but for how many more years are we going to continue to do that? You know, we still need, I think, a fundamental change in the way that we fund education and probably organize it. But anyway, that's above and beyond what we're talking about here. But I just wanted to make sure that people understand you're voting for a municipal side and a property tax side for the education in March. So it would be, if I were going to be, and I'm not in the city, I'm in the town, but if I were going to vote on that, I'd want to be pretty well informed about why it is that this went up and this didn't and all that. And I know from talking to the mayor, we labor costs are at the top of the list for sure, whether that's for positions or healthcare costs. And that one still puzzles me. I don't understand exactly why they keep going up by double digits, the healthcare costs, by the way. But again, that's above and probably our grade level or pay level, as they say.
Well, I think it's worth, it's worth being educated on, though, even though it's more of a state level thing. And I think you talk about the school consolidation. When you look at when the overlay in costs in physical plant, so buildings and facilities, and the overlay in costs in labor and administration, there's certain things that can be consolidated. And while, I read the article that talked about kind of the way that this group, the task force, went about saying, hey, listen, we've got this whole model we'd like to use, kind of that New York uses to consolidate some of the, the structure, but in reality, keeping all the districts, it didn't make sense because it actually looked like it might cost more in the end. So I struggle with that, having conversations with our local school systems and, looking at their costs. I think one of the things that was pitched at one point was, hey, here's what we're going to give everybody for cost. And if your school wants to spend more than that, that can go to the local voters. Well, that's all well and good. But there are also changes that are happening outside of the scope, outside of the state right now on the federal level, as the Department of Education is being changed. I don't know, people are using the term dismantled. I don't know where it's going to land, but on the federal level, there's a $60 million budget for Rutland City Public Schools-ish, and 25 of that
comes from the feds.
And I'm not the superintendent or the finance side, but some of that comes from the federal government. A lot of it comes for special programs. And so will those get eliminated if they need to? It's a very tumultuous time. So when you look, because at the end of the day, Brian, for me, as the mayor, when people get their tax bill in the mail, which I get one, and mine is not small, right? It's great that half of the bill is the city and half of the bill is the state education, but at the end of the day, it's the one big number at the bottom, right. And that's where we have to be cognizant of. If Rutland City Public Schools were to increase their budget X amount, that doesn't all fall on the backs of the Rutland taxpayers. It gets spread throughout the rest of the state to a certain percentage. And our reappraisal that we're going, there's so many things in flight right now. So it's going to be difficult to know what next year's, the July, August tax bill is going to look like. But we have to do our part, not just in the city, but at the state level, to make sure that we control those costs as best possible. Yeah. Some of this is just stuff that's out of our control. So.
And again, the mayor's absolutely right. And I think next year and the year following, it'll be the same pattern where I will say regardless, the vote that you cast on the school education property tax does not necessarily reflect a 1-to-1 ratio. In other words, you're not saying yes to the tax increase and all of that comes back. What you're saying yes is to a particular number, but all of the money goes to Montpelier, and then it is sent back based on a whole bunch of factors. And in essence, Burlington, which dismantled, I think they did. I think they tore the old Burlington High School down. Maybe it's still up. I don't know. But for whatever reason, and there are people that say they didn't need to do that, by the way, they built, in my view, a Taj Mahal of a high school, a brand new high school. And most people don't realize a little part of that is being paid for by everybody in the state, not just Burlington taxpayers. So that's the danger, if you will, of letting the current system go in place for a couple more years. All that money goes up, but not all of it comes back to Rutland. Only some of it comes back. So it's that sort of puzzle that I think we need to change. We need to at least look at it. I don't know what the number of school districts or supervisory unions or supervisory districts there should be. I have no idea. But I don't think what we have now seems to be working very well. I know there are people that vehemently disagree with what I just said, and that's fine. And we can certainly have a discussion. But it's costing more every year. Nobody can deny that. The test scores, they're not terrible in terms of the trajectory, but they're kind of in the middle of the pack for the 50 states. Mm-hmm. And yet there's fewer kids. So we need to do something.
So I was in D.C. last week, and we were having conversations. Arizona was there. They're struggling with their test scores as well and their education spend. And, we're not the only ones in this boat. But I'll tell you, Vermont is one of the highest per pupil, in the top 5 in highest per pupil spend.
Right.
And that has a lot to do with the rural nature of our state, how spread out we are, and how we have to provide the same services 30 miles apart because it's hard to get there, right? That's the cost problem. So, but our test scores are not in the top 5%. In the top 5. Our test scores are in the lower 8th, if not the lower 16th of the country. It's not a reflective thing. Now, but Arizona also shows that spend doesn't equal high test scores, right? So what it really comes down to is we want our kids to have the best education possible, period, end of sentence. There's no question there. I think the way to do that is going to have to be to seriously consider restructuring the system as a whole, because the way it's working now isn't working.
Yeah, and I think most people would agree with that. Even people that feel strongly that what we have in place is not all that bad. Unfortunately, in my view, again, the task force, we were underrepresented in terms of Southern Vermont. We had Dave Walk, who I have ultimate respect for, and we had a couple of folks from Windham County that were on, or at least one. I don't know about the retired superintendents. I don't know where all they came from. But the 2 chairs of that task force were all from Chittenden County. So, again, depending on where you are, you sort of look out for your own place, and I get that. I
right.
mean, I totally understand that. The vote, by the way, was 8-3. 8 people in favor of what will come out as their final report, and 3 were against. And I don't think it would take a lot of digging around to find out who the 3 were and who the 8 were. But at any rate, I just wanted to mention that, there's a lot at play here in the next year in terms of the taxes that you all pay for police services, fire services, recreation services, DPW services, and also our educational system. And if there's a way to make it more equitable, like Chittenden County doesn't get all of it kind of thing, that would be the way I would start. But I think, again, the healthcare costs, and this is an interesting thing. I have no idea how possible this is, but the federal administration, the Trump administration, has suggested that, and I don't know how to undo what we have now, that we somehow sort of like ignore the insurance companies and just rather send checks to everybody, and then they shop on their own for their policy. I'm not sure how that would ever work. It sounds like a great idea, but geez, I don't know how you'd ever be able to do that. But it would introduce competition back into things, which I think is a great lever to use to bring prices back down. But I thought it was an interesting suggestion. It's never going to happen. I mean, a lot of times what's suggested up there never, and I think the people that are making those suggestions know that, but they just throw stuff out.
Yeah, and healthcare is not my area of expertise by
nor
any stretch.
mine.
Yeah, so I'll stay out of that conversation for now. I just know my costs are going up at the city and our employees too. I do want to say one more thing on the education stuff. We are quite blessed down here in Rutland, though. We have great schools,
absolutely,
great teachers, amazing administrators. So whatever gets done, we have to make sure that we continue with that level of excellence that we are.
Yeah, so, I agree. Yeah. All right, we're going to take our first break here, and we're going to be talking to Rutland City Mayor Mike Doenges, and we will be back here on Catamount Community Connection in just a minute. We're back on Catamount Community Connection, and again, this is our weekly show. I'm Brian Collamore. We have the City of Rutland Mayor with us today. And our show is brought to you by the Rutland County Agricultural Society, which has brought you the Vermont State Fair at Rutland since 1846. The 150th Vermont State Fair is ahead. It sounds like a long ways away, but it really isn't. Next August, 2026, and we're looking forward to that. And we've talked about the budget and a little bit about the split with your tax bill. Some of it will go to municipal services. I think it isn't 50-50. I wish it was. I think it's more like 70-30. But the other part is the educational property tax system. And there'll be a letter coming out very soon. When you hear this show, it probably will be in the week coming up in the early part of December that will allow people some idea. Again, it's not a firm number. It's going to change about what the tax increases will be on that property tax side. And we'll have to see how things sugar off. Maybe we will find some money. Maybe there's three funds at the state level. There's the education fund, the transportation fund, and the general fund. The general fund takes all of the income taxes, sales and use, all that kind of stuff. And that's been very strong over the last couple of years. It's ahead of projections still. The ed fund is actually not in bad shape right now. It's probably about even. The transportation fund is way off. The factor there is the gas tax. As more and more people begin to use other ways to get around, they don't pay gas tax anymore because they're not buying gasoline. And so we have to find a way to sort of bring that back. And that has a lot to do with how many miles of paving on the state level get done and how many don't. So anyway, that's what we've been talking about. The mayor and I were in a meeting last week with the folks from the Rutland Housing Authority, and Kathleen Burke, who's the executive director of the Vermont State Housing Authority, was there as a guest and made a pretty good presentation, I thought, about the Section 8 situation, and not just statewide, but certainly we kept referencing Rutland's situation. Kevin Loso is our local director of the Rutland Housing Authority. And it was a pretty, I thought, good presentation. They're going to be asking for a one-time general fund appropriation of up to $10 million to stabilize what is in place now. And again, this all comes back to the federal cuts that have been or have been threatened to be made, and it will put in danger a lot of people that are now in stable housing. And I don't know whether that, and it's been presented to the Joint Fiscal Committee, and we'll have to see whether there's an emergency board meeting in the next couple of weeks to whether that happens or not. I'm not really that familiar with Section 8 stuff, but it seems to me, and I think I did make this comment at the end of the meeting, that if I were to have a choice between what we have now with the hotel-motel situation in terms of putting money into it or Section 8, I would go with the Section 8 because it seems to provide stable and permanent housing for families, whereas the other one is sort of a here today, gone tomorrow kind of thing.
Yeah. So let's look at the bigger picture for a second, right? So Rutland's been challenged with a very large population of those who don't have housing,
Yep.
right? Unhoused or homeless, depending on who you're talking to. And one of the best things that we've been able to do is for these families is get them a permanent housing voucher, Section 8 voucher, and get them into housing. So when I first became mayor, so that's a little under 3 years ago, I sat down with Kevin, and Kevin had told me, he's like, look, we have good funding. We just don't have enough places for people to live. So we actually have about 70 vouchers that are not in use. Mm-hmm. There were plenty of people that needed those vouchers and plenty of vouchers available. And that demand still exists today. Plenty of people that need the vouchers. But there weren't enough places for people to live. Period. End of sentence. Major issue in the community. While they were able to leverage those vouchers, so people, whether it was people who lost their jobs or people who were able to find a place to live and get that voucher, they used some of those vouchers. Okay. Now, with these changes at the federal level, 40 or so vouchers in Rutland County, and a lot of those are in the city, are unfunded as of January 1. We still have a challenge with people who don't have a place to live. Right. We still have a challenge with housing, but that's not the issue anymore. The issue isn't we don't have enough places to live. The issue is now we don't have enough money to keep the people who are currently housed, Brian, in their homes because of the reduced funding for the program. Now, the ask from Vermont Housing Authority and Rutland Housing Authority, like you had said, it was to the legislature to say, hey, can you help fill this gap? And for the whole state, do you remember, I think it was $10 million
right.
for the coming year.
Yep.
$10 million. And of that, Rutland was probably $600,000 to $1 million, depending. That is massive. A massive amount of money that we were just talking about the schools and how we're going to supplement the fund. And now there's another ask the ask is a reasonable ask. This is a very abrupt change with not a lot of notice and no planning to go into how to, to ease that down. And that's, consider, let's go on the conservative side. Let's say it's 25 families in Rutland that would lose their housing because they don't have enough sources of income to pay their rent. Wow, that is a huge impact when an already burdened system. So this is going to be a big challenge for our community.
Yeah, and my fear is if those, and I'll just take your number at 25, all of a sudden the door's shut, see you later. Where are they going to go? How are they going to make it? And I'm afraid that those 25 people will wind up going back to the hotel motel thing, which doesn't work.
And there is currently a bill, Representative McGuire is working on the new GA bill along with his committee. And it looks like the new changes for that program are going to be better, but it also doesn't address, the idea is to go back to pre-COVID utilization of the general assistance program. That was for Rutland, that was 50 people at the worst amount of time, right? So what's the transition? Now I get we have to make a decision, right? So HUD doesn't want to fund as many vouchers, fine, that's their decision. The GA program is going to change, fine, that's the decision. But there are humans involved, so what's the transition process look like? What's that period of time? Yeah. What are the resources that people can access in the interim is the challenge that we're going to be up against.
Yeah, and it's not the only challenge we'll hear, as you mentioned, we're going to have to do something with the educational system. I don't know how much it's going to be. I don't know where we're going to find the money. We've got a voucher now, or a Section 8 vouching problem, and then we got SNAP benefits on top of all that. It's going to be a particularly challenging year to put a budget together that's balanced, and Vermont does put balanced budgets in place. I just don't see where all that request is going to be able to be met. And if it isn't, what happens when they don't get met? It almost makes it worse. And yet, I know from the election results back in November a year ago, people were pretty clear about how they felt, certainly about the property taxes. I think in the end, that was a big factor in who voted and the manner in which they voted. So I don't know. I'm equally perplexed.
Vermont is an expensive place to live overall. Again, we have a pretty large landmass. It's pretty diverse geographically, which makes getting around difficult, which means providing services can be difficult. Yep. So that's a real fact of the matter. But there's 660,000 people that live here. in a state that is built for and could sustain close to 1.5-2 million, right? So we have to fix that problem. That's that mission 802, right? To have 802,000 people living in Vermont by 2030. I think that's a great mission, and that's going to help some of the affordability issues. But at the end of the day, that's a long way. 2030 is a little ways away. I mean, maybe it was 2040. I don't remember the date, but it is a ways away, and there's the in-between piece. So here's the thing, though. And I know the show is aired on Sunday, December 1st, right? Mm-hmm. All of these challenges are happening in real time for the people that need the services. This is why, and I'm just going to drop, it's your thing, but the WSYB Christmas Fund, why it's so important for people to think about, like, hey, can I help in this area, right? Because the SNAP benefits is a huge deal. There's a cash benefit piece that did not come back and may not come back at this point, right? There's the healthcare struggles that we're in. All of these things add up, and you and I, Mike and Brian, we feel the burden of that in our own way.
Sure.
But there are people that feel it much worse. So that's why things like, Stuff a Bus, which went successfully, it was extremely well. The Wheels for Warmth went extremely well. And I think, we need to really think about the Christmas Fund too this year.
Yeah, and I'm glad you did bring it up. We had our first broadcast this past Friday with Terry J., myself, Tom Moore, some of the other folks you were in to read the proclamation, and Dave Allaire, the president of the board. And so beginning tomorrow, for the next 2 weeks, so tomorrow and then until the 12th of December, we'll be on every morning from 6 to 10 on both WSYB and WJJR to just try to remind people of the need. And by the way, the need is greater this year than I can remember for quite some time. We have an A, B, and C list that's generated by the nonprofits who are our partners in this. All the radio station does is raise the money. We don't decide who gets what and all that stuff. That comes from the nonprofit groups that are part of our effort. But I will say that, it's hard for me to imagine sitting at a table and saying, okay, that family is an A and that family's a B. Mm-hmm. The C's, I think you could sort of say, okay, if everybody else could be gotten to, then we have other people that would love to. But how do you decide whether it's an A or a B? I don't know. I'm glad I don't have to make that decision. But we have more A's and more B's than we've had in a long time. So the need is as great, if not greater, than it's ever been. And I think we run the risk at this point of not being able to take care of all the A families and seniors in the county. I'll just make mention again, all the proceeds that are raised stay in the county, Rutland County, doesn't go anywhere else. Nobody gets paid a dime to do this. The radio station employees all donate their time. The radio station and the owner, Jim Morrell, pay for everything else. If there's postage, he picks that up, whatever it is, printing costs, so it's a kind of a dime in, a dime out kind of situation, the proceeds for it. And I don't know anything else that we could make better of it. We try every year to the best of our ability to reach as many people as we can. And we're going to be up against it this year. We really are. As the mayor pointed out, the good news for me was to witness the end result of the tire sale. That raised $110,000 statewide, which was a record. And Rutland County raised $40,000 of it, which is a record. And then the Stuff a Bus program was, I think Terry told me, $42,000 in cash. And I think he said 8 tons of food, both of which were brand new records. So, you kind of say, okay, well, the need's great, but geez, people are giving more. Maybe we can kind of make it all work again and reach as many people as need be. And we're hoping that that's the case this year with the Christmas Fund. So, yeah, we'll be, for the next 2 weeks, come on by in the morning from 6 to 10 and drop off what you can. Don't be embarrassed if it's $5, $10, $15, $20. Those all add up. We do have corporate people, I won't mention names, but I think everybody can imagine who they might be, that are able and willing to advance between $5,000 and $10,000 each, and have for many years. And so, when it's all added up, maybe we will be able to get all through the A's and hopefully a good part of the bees as well. But that remains to be seen, and hopefully in the next couple of weeks we'll have more smiles on our faces.
That would be great. And, like Brian said, we were talking about it before we were getting the show together this morning, and the demand is so high this year because of those different factors in the community, right? We just talked about the housing piece. So, if you've got a little more to give and you can give a little bit more this year while you're out shopping, while you're out looking for gifts, think about saving $5 here or there and throwing it in the direction of the Christmas fund. Trust me, Rutland County appreciates it in a big way.
I don't know whether you can remember Alex Dunn. You're too young maybe to remember
Let's just say that.
But he was a driving force in terms of the face and the voice of the Christmas Fund. And this was back when it was just WSYB. And Ted Pendleton would read the letters to Santa and all that kind of stuff. But it just goes to show you how life has changed. I remember distinctly one of Alex's promos saying, you could quit smoking and make a donation to the WSYB Christmas Fund. And I'm thinking, back in those days, a pack of cigarettes was probably, 30 cents, maybe 50. And so the amount of money has changed, obviously. Now I don't even know. I don't smoke, so I don't know.
I think it's like $11.
It's outrageous. It's absolutely outrageous.
There's some smoker like shaking their head.
You have to take a mortgage out to afford a carton. But anyway, that just struck me as kind of one of those things. But yeah, the Christmas Fund is I think near and dear to a lot of people's hearts, especially employees here. Some of whom have left here and gone to pretty good-sized markets, Atlanta and Jacksonville, Florida. I know people that are down there, Hartford, Connecticut. Maine. And one of the things they remember about everything else that took place when they worked here was the Christmas Fund. And it's always been, I think, a source of pride for this community to know for 53 years now we've been able to do it. We're looking for people, by the way, to join the board. Many of us are getting longer in the tooth each year, and there'll have to be a time when there's transition. And so if you're interested, please get a hold of me or Terry J. or Deb Grembowitz, and hopefully we can enlist your help to make sure that this goes for another 53 years. That would be nice.
That'd be incredible.
All right, let's take our second break here on Catamount Community Connection. We're talking with Rutland City Mayor Mike Doenges, and we'll be back in just a minute. Welcome back to Catamount Community Connection, the weekly public affairs show here on Catamount Radio. I'm Brian Collamore, and really appreciate folks telling me, I listen to your show. I'm usually on my way to work somewhere very early or very late, and, I enjoy it. So I thank you for that. I really do. The show brought to you by the Rutland County Agricultural Society. Don't forget the Vermont State Fair has been here since 1846. And we are looking forward to the 180th Vermont State Fair next August. So we're with the Rutland City Mayor today, Mike Doenges, and I understand you've got some additional work in progress with something you want to get done.
Yeah, so I've got a bit of a communication series that I'm going to be doing over the next few weeks. So I'll post it in the Herald, probably post it online too. We can talk about it here. But, when you look at the style that I like to go with, I'm a very positive person, right? I tend to find the silver lining in all situations. And I think there's so much opportunity in Rutland. And we talk about that. And I focus a lot on that. But in order for things to actually improve, I come from an IT background, Brian. And we have this, this continuous improvement process where you're always looking at the changes you've made and said, did they make the impact that we wanted them to have? When you look at problems and you analyze them, are you looking at just the symptom, or are you actually looking at the problem? And when I've communicated with Rutland citizens over the past 3 years, it's usually on the, hey, we did these things, it worked really well, here's the positive outcome. But what I'm finding more and more, right, as I talk to people about affordability, as I talk to people about challenges in our community, is that people actually want to know how this stuff works and what goes on the inside. Like, what are we doing and how do we get to that end result? So we're going to it's going to be a pretty real series. We're going to talk about stuff that's going on in our community. Like, what are our public safety challenges? Why do we have them? What are the roadblocks? Because as a municipality in the state of Vermont, we don't have the same tools as, say, a municipality in Arizona or in Ohio, because we don't have the same laws, right? So what are the things that we're up against in the city to try to impact change so that we can make our city safe, or find solutions to the challenges with homeless that we see? I've been meeting with some business leaders lately that have had some great ideas and they want to help. And I, from those conversations, I went down to a conference in DC last week. From some of the things that I learned there, what I'm starting to realize is there's a real opportunity to communicate to the Rutland City citizens and, anybody in the county that wants to hear, to talk about these things so that we can maybe earn their support to help with these challenges, right? When you're taking testimony in the Senate and you got a room full of people that all came from the same issue, that even though one person may be speaking, that's a powerful presence to have community leaders and business owners and, people that are just from the community showing up to support a law or a new bill that's changing. So I really want to spend some time over the next, 4 or 5 weeks to talk about, yes, we've accomplished some amazingly good things. We're going to talk about those. We have the TIF district. We've gotten our housing numbers up. We've gotten a lot of money brought to Rutland to develop new things, $8 million from Roofs Over Rutland. All of that will be in there. But we also want to talk about the affordability challenge and why it exists the way it does today. I mean, the simple math equation of there's just not enough people or enough properties to divvy up the load. And I think that you and I and our colleagues, we talk about this in our groups and we all understand it, but I don't know that everybody out there does. And I think it's a good opportunity to inform people about what's going on.
Yeah, no, I think it's a great idea. I don't know if you and I have mentioned it. I know I did on a previous show. Lyle Jepson, who is a former CEO of CEDAR, the Chamber and Economic Development of the Rutland region, has been tabbed by the governor to become the Commissioner of Economic Development and began his work a couple of weeks ago already. So he's sort of gone, but he's promised to keep Rutland in his lens all the time, and I know he will. But that's another example of, I think, something that's really positive for the area, because we now have somebody in a pretty good position of authority representing Rutland County up there, and he's driving back and forth, which did surprise me. Although I'm glad he didn't move. But
yeah, me too.
At the same time, maybe you rent an apartment or something and stay a couple nights a week. I don't know. But anyway, that's not my business. That's Lyle. But I did ask him. I said, "Are you going to drive back?" And he said, "Oh yeah, no problem."
It's hard to take the Lyle out of Rutland.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
It's going to be difficult, and we all have his cell phone number. So whether he likes it or not, unless he changes the number, Rutland's been paying attention.
The other thing Mike mentioned, for those of you that are not familiar, we are a so-called Dillon state.
That's right.
What that means is that municipalities in Vermont can only do very, very limited changes to their charters without the approval of the legislature, the General Assembly. So, and my committee in government operations is in charge on the Senate side of all the charters. So if a charter, I'm trying to think of a good example, it isn't as minute or granular as putting a stop sign up somewhere. That can certainly happen without legislative approval. But if you want to fundamentally change, for instance, if the Board of Aldermen, and what's there, 11 now?
11.
If they wanted to make it 13, I'm pretty sure that would have, first of all,
that would be a charter change.
It'd have to go through a charter change and then get approved by the voters. It's that kind of thing. So it does present yet another barrier for a municipality to be able to change something quickly that people here might all be in favor of. And for whatever reason, the General Assembly might not see it the same way. So I'll just mention that. We're a Dillon state.
We have to, because of the Dillon state rules, because basically our charter is state law. We do have things that we can do, and we have to get creative sometimes. We do have things that we can do with our ordinances.
Right.
So that's essentially think of that as the local law, where we can actually make rule changes. The state limits what the penalties are if you break an ordinance. So we can do up to the state maximum, which I think is $850 ticket, or up to the state maximum, which is a year in prison. We don't usually. I don't think we've put anybody in jail for breaking ordinances in probably 50 years in Rutland City. But it is also tools in the toolbox that we haven't used for certain things that we will start to. I mean, when we've got I mean, let's talk about it. When we have people selling drugs out of houses in our neighborhoods, and we've put some real initiatives to this, the whole team, right? Building and zoning, the police department, the fire department, DPW rec, we've all gotten on board to solve some of these problems that they seem like a policing problem, but because there's no laws in certain areas, we might need to use laws in other areas. This is what we're really going to take a deep look at is are there things that we can do at this level to solve some of these crime issues in our community and to solve some of these affordability issues, whatever they happen to be.
Okay, that's fair enough. We have about 5 minutes left. It's probably a little early to ask you this next question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. It's probably 13 months early because it's March to March is 12, and we got December, January, February.
That's right.
Do you have, as we speak, any formative plans for office for mayor or somewhere else?
Oh man, that's a bigger question than I thought you were going to ask.
Okay. Well,
no, I think listen, I love this community. I chose to run for mayor. Brian, I came from a 25-year IT career, right? Yep. And I chose to run for mayor because I saw the opportunity that is Rutland to be better for everybody that lives here, right? I think that's the best way to say it. Everybody that lives here wants Rutland to be better. No one has ever said to me, everything is perfect the way it is. You know what I mean? Everyone.
Or I hope it gets worse.
Right, exactly. So I ran for mayor for that purpose. I'm in the middle of my second term. I have not looked that far out. What I'm focused on right now is what we can do in the next 30, 60, 90 days to improve things, and then 3, 6, 9 months to keep things rolling. I am a long-term thinker, but it's not about me and what I want to do. It's more about what's the future of Rutland and how do we get there. So if that's where I spend my brain power right now. We've got our city master plan rework. We have to do these every 8 years, our city municipal plan. And this one's going to be dubbed Rutland 2050, which is something that when I ran the first time I wanted to do. Give me a vision for 2050. What should our city look like? How should we be operating? What does it cost to live here? How do we get these things done so that we have a target and a goal? And I'm excited that we're finally getting there. It was finding the time, money, and resources to do that. But that's where I'm focused. So, maybe ask me again in a year. I'll let you know.
Okay, that's fair. And that was a pretty good political answer.
Thanks.
If somebody asked me the same thing, I will say I plan on running again, but I'm up for election before you are.
That's right. November, right?
Next November, yeah. Everybody is from the state level down. So from the governor all the way to the justices of the peace, we're elected every other year. So in a lot of ways, it's always election season. You can't sort of, like it is with a 4-year term or 6, if you're a U.S. senator.
That's right.
You could sort of put it on the shelf for a little bit. We're always kind of...
2 years is so hard to get things done in, though. Really it was so interesting. Part of running the second time was to say, I probably had 10 different projects or things in flight.
Already started, yeah.
And luckily we've completed most of them, but it took a second term to do that, right? Yeah. So,
yeah. All right, well, I'll ask you again. Don't worry.
All right.
I will. We have 2 minutes left. I'll just throw it back to you if you want. Don't forget the Christmas Fund starting tomorrow. 6 to 10 on WSYB and WJJR. Every morning for the next 2 weeks until the 12th, we'll be trying to raise money for the Christmas Fund, and we'd love to have you, regardless of what station you're hearing this on, we'd love to have you stop by and help us out.
Yeah, tell your friends. Get people out there. With the budget season, go back to that. Go to rutlandcity.org. Check out the city calendar. They're public meetings. Come talk about your concerns. If you feel like we need more infrastructure, come to the Public Works meeting. If you feel like public safety is something you're really concerned about, come to the public safety meeting. It is supposed to be open to you to come and communicate with us about your feelings of what's happening in your community, and we invite that holistically. I'd love to see you there.
Yeah. Congratulations to April Chaffee. I don't know if I've had an opportunity to mention her name. I'm sure she's going to do, well, she already has been doing a great job. But now that the interim is off and she can really dig her heels in, I know she's going to do great. And so things are good. Hopefully everybody had a great Thanksgiving a few days back. And we look forward to the Christmas or holiday season in whatever fashion you celebrate it.
There you go.
And, continued success to everybody in the coming year. Not sure who we'll talk to next week. I'll have to find another victim somewhere around. But we look forward to it. And Mike Doenges, thank you for being our guest today.
Happy holidays, Brian.
Yeah, you too. And we will definitely have you back at some point as well in the future. And we will see all of you next week here on Catamount Community Connection.